Thank you for joining us on episode 6 of the From Eden podcast. I am so excited about this one, guys. We discussed 2 different quotes today, and they're completely the opposite of each other, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Welcome back if you are returning, and if it's your first time, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you do get a chance to look back at the other episodes and just give your feedback as usual, always open to share, to getting some feedback on everything from Instagram to Facebook. And on this episode, we are discussing when you are truly stuck, when you have stood still in the same spot for too long, you throw a grenade in exactly the spot you were standing in and jump. And pray it is the moment of last resort. Wow. Versus good things take time. So, I think you guys get a sense of how opposing or contrasting these quotes are. And Katya and I just had an amazing time discussing this, and I hope you enjoy it. We try to get to a point where we talk about striking the balance and, of course, just sharing our own experiences with it. So, as I mentioned before, please do interact with us on our social media pages and enjoy the episode. Listen till the very end. So thank you so much for coming on, Katya. It's been ages. We were actually just having like a little brief thing before where we realized we haven't spoken in four years now. Yeah, since we graduated from UWC. And that gives you some context of where I know her from. We went to UWC Diligent together, spent 2 years in a small bubble with like 200 people. So that's how I met Katya.
Very intense. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. I mean, it's honestly such an honor to be on here. I've really, admired you and respected you and everything that you do for such a long time. So it's very exciting to be able to have this conversation with you here.
Yeah, I like how you say that. And I was always a fan of Katya. And we had this weird dynamic where we were both really fans of each other. I had so much respect for her. And anytime she did something, I would be fangirling and I'm like, oh my God.
Well, I also fangirled about you. So I think it's a good match.
Yeah, I mean, so before we get into anything, just give us a brief intro as to who you are, where you are now, and so on.
Sure. Well, my name is Katya. I don't even know where to start with this intro. I think I'm a little bit culturally confused in that I'm Russian, but I've lived in a lot of different places. So sometimes I also go by Katie. So you can call me either in this podcast. I think I'm trying to think how I described myself recently on a dating app. I think it was passionate about sustainable cities, vegetables, and languages. And I think that pretty much sums up who I am. I'm currently in London studying urban planning and languages. And I'm studying how to make our cities more resilient and sustainable. And I also write music and run stupidly long distances, and that's pretty much me.
I noticed on Instagram the marathons you've been running. I was
it's just how to deal with it's just to help me deal with my perpetual existential crises. That's all that is.
Well, we're going to get into that a little bit today.
Yes.
Because just to show you how much of an existential crisis we're in right now, Katya chose 2 different quotes, and they're very contrasting.
Yes.
They're on opposite sides of well, they're just really different approaches. So let's get into more of like how you came to choosing those quotes and like why now.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. And I mean, I chose 2 quotes not because I wanted to be special, but I think because for me it was exciting to talk about navigating the space in between those 2 very different quotes. So the first quote is from a book called Speedboat by Renata Adler, which I haven't actually read, but this quote was quoted in another book called Tracks by Robin Davidson. And it was my favorite book when I was 15. And I read it actually when I was applying to UWC. And this quote is, "I think when you are truly stuck, when you have stood still in the same spot for too long, you throw a grenade in exactly the spot you were standing in and jump and pray. It is the momentum of last resort." And I read this quote at a time when I was really stuck and really miserable, and I was going to a school where I didn't fit in. And I think I had spent, many years before that moment when I finally decided to jump, and to make that change in my life and to apply to WC, really sort of paralyzed by the fear of change and the fear of doing something wrong. And even though I kind of was unhappy in that, the school that I was in and the context I was in, I think I was good at being the person that people expected me to be. So this sort of like goody two shoes, A student, whatever. And that was comfortable in a sense, right? So, I mean, even though it was not a nice, time in my life, I think I also knew how to exist in that space and as that person. So to make a big change was still a big risk. And that's why when I first read this quote, I was like, wow, okay, this is, this really resonates with me. And I remember all throughout the application process to UWC, and actually in the airport, when I was just about to leave for Armenia, I read this quote to myself over and over again. And it was sort of this reassurance that what I was doing was the right thing, that I needed to jump, I needed to throw a grenade where I was standing. And I like this quote because of the imagery that, it's as if to say, once you do that, there is no going back. It's the kind of change where it can't be a half-hearted one. It's like you are committing yourself to the unknown, and you have to accept whatever comes along with that. So that's the first quote. I don't know if you wanted to talk about this one, or if I should just say the next one already.
I think you can go ahead and say the next one, and we'll just bounce back and forth for that balance.
Yeah. So the next one is actually in Russian, which is "Не всё сразу," but it translates, like literally it translates in English to "not everything at once." But I think that the closest English kind of phrase or quote that means the same thing is probably that good things take time, or trust the process. Sort of this to have faith that things will develop in their own time, and just because something doesn't happen in the first 5 minutes of it entering your life, it doesn't mean that it will never happen. And so the reason why I chose these two quotes was because I think I'm at a point in my life now where I'm trying to understand how to navigate the space in between these two extremes of, knowing when to jump, knowing when to let go of something that isn't serving you and your interests anymore, and is not bringing you closer to the person that you want to become, but also being able to have faith and patience and, not let go of things too soon, just because you don't see the bigger picture yet. So those are my two quotes.
See, and that's like, it's interesting. That's why I wanted you to go through them at once, because striking the balance. And I think like that's what's gonna come up a lot on this podcast, like striking the balance. And I find it interesting that when you started with the grenade one, so like taking a chance and just jumping into it, it's easier to decide, it seems, when you're at a point where you're miserable. It's almost like you have nothing to lose. Like there's no way but up. And then there's this one where it's you are trying to see whether misery is a part of the process as well, and like whether it develops into joy, or whether it's just like it's just a stage of the like along the way. Now, do you find that you've, like, up until now, you've always maybe waited for a point of misery until you take a leap and you take a jump? Like, do you find that maybe you've been practicing the one more than the other? Like the patience one.
That's a good question. And actually, I think it's really interesting how you put it, that the other one is sort of accepting misery as part of the process, that there is something good that comes at the end of that journey. I do think I've been practicing the first one, I mean, the jumping one, but not always from a point of misery. And I think that has been something that has been really rewarding in my life, is to take those risks and to take those jumps and commit yourself to something big and scary, when it's something that excites you and when it's something that adds to your life, as opposed to something that, it doesn't have to be completely life changing, but still requires you to take a leap of faith, particularly in yourself. When you sign up for a big goal or something. I mean, for me, it was, running. It has been running for a few years now, but to do something that that seems impossible to me, to commit myself to that and to say, I cannot imagine myself doing this, but I'm going to, commit myself to it, and, and tell people around me that I've committed myself to it. And it's equally terrifying and exciting, I think. And there's the only pain associated maybe with that one, and the only misery associated with that one is this potential for you not realizing that goal, and the potential for you disappointing yourself and potentially people around you. But I think the other one, this not everything at once, that's or to trust the process, I think that's something that has entered my life fairly recently. I think within the last year or half a year. And I think that's also just a natural part of growing up, and also having committed to those other things. It's like when you've done something for 3 years and you look back and you say, wow, I did this, I stuck to it, and this is where I am now. And this is, compared to where I was 3 years ago. I think that's a really special feeling, to know that you have committed and that you have, trusted the process when it was so easy to quit or so easy to let go so many times before. So I think I'm practicing, having patience, but still there are some moments still where it's sort of, where you think, is this misery worth it? And particularly, is this misery, does it involve me or does it involve other people? And what am I sacrificing exactly? So
Like, let's talk about the trusting the process a little more here, because you mentioned something interesting, in the sense that you did say that in retrospect, like after the 4 years or whatever, you actually look back and you're like, okay, I did this, I stuck to it. However, during those 3 or 4 years, it's almost, there's most often a feeling of like not doing anything, right? So I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, how do you navigate that feeling of like, this is where I am, and the day-to-day is actually contributing to something bigger, and trying to make sure that you don't feel stuck? Because if you're like an action person, and I know this about you because you're a bit of an overachiever, lack of a better word. So how do you navigate that in your day-to-day, like the little bits contributing to the bigger picture, and also just like understanding that maybe you're not stuck, you're just working towards something right now?
That's a great question. I think, I am very sort of goal oriented, and I like to plan things and organize things. I mean, you should see my Notion. It's all like super color coordinated and super, super organized, and like, I like to plan my year. I like to make, like vision boards for my life, a little bit extra in that sense. But I do think that, in terms of the day to day, I do think that it's important not to think about those individual things in your life. So not to think about necessarily the running or the whatever other project you're working on, or getting over a breakup or whatever. Think about and visualize the person that you want to be at the end of it. So have a endpoint in mind, and set yourself some goals along the way. I mean, I know it's very different for running than, getting over a breakup, right? But with running, you set yourself goals, and when you achieve those goals along the way, every time you pass a milestone that you set for yourself, you gain some sort of confidence, and you gain some sort of belief in yourself to reach the next one. And then by setting those sort of markers for yourself at the end, it's kind of like you set a path for yourself to get, to where you want to be. But I think for those less tangible things, so, you know, not about running distances, but other aspects of life, I do, and I swear by vision boards. And people who are close to me, they really, I think they kind of make fun of it, but they know that that's such a huge part of my process and a huge part of my, you know, what exactly what you said, like, how do you get through the day to day knowing that it's going to benefit you in the future? And I really do think that actively visualizing where I want to be and what I want to have in my life has helped me so much, because I do think that it's so exciting to look back at a board that you made in January, you know, the next year, and see how much you have created from, you know, what you visualized at the beginning of the year. And I know for myself that if there's something that I'm not ready for, I'm too scared to put it on the board, you know. So it's sort of like once I have enough courage to put something on the board, there's a good chance it's going to happen, you know. So I think that in that sense, I do like to plan maybe year to year, instead of, you know, like saying, okay, in 10 years, maybe I'll be this or maybe I'll be that. But I do still think that shorter term goals, or like even a year, and really visualizing, I think that helps to get through the day-to-day grind of everything.
Yeah, I mean, because a key aspect, I was thinking about it when you were talking of like trust the process. We talk about the process a lot, but like the trust element is very key. And I think it's I find the visualization aspect very important, because it's as humans, it's almost impossible to trust something that you can't see. Like we have a tendency to gravitate towards things that are like visually accessible to us, like things that we can see, things that we can, which is why I guess it's very hard to set goals, because you're imagining something that's non-existent and trying to get your day to day to reflect that. So yeah, I think the visualization thing is very important for the trust element. But it brings me to another thought as well, with like the things that you don't have control over. Like the elements where now being part of the process is trusting maybe people, or not just trusting your goals, because you kind of have full control over. I wake up, I do this, and by the end of the day, I've either done the assignment or I haven't. But like, like how is it for you navigating, like trusting the process when it comes to like the people around you, or the things that you don't necessarily have control over, the changes in attitudes or relationships and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe that's the part that I'm having the most difficulty navigating. But I do still think that, I think maybe there's two aspects to this. I think that the first one is, first of all, to always remember that everyone is on their own journey and everyone is also growing in their own way. And so when someone does something unexpected in their relationship with you, it's very rarely about you. And this is something that I try to always remember, and not take things too close to heart when, you know, someone else's actions influence, you know, the path that I had, you know, sort of set out. Because people are also developing and growing at their own rate and in their own way. And sometimes that means that you have to sort of grow apart for a while, you know, if it's a relationship, or, you know, if it's friends or people you're working on something with. I mean, I think that in that case, as long as, and this is kind of the key thing for me that I try to, or that I think for me must be a constant here, and that's mutual respect. And I think that you can change and you can grow apart and, you know, grow together again, but there always has to be respect between, you know, people in your life. And I think if you can respect each other's, you know, processes and respect each other's growth, I think that that's the most important thing. And then in that sense, these short-term goals or short-term hopes that involve other people maybe become less relevant, because you know that at the core of it, these people are still, you know, ones that are important to your life and you know, support you and you support them. And I think that's also sort of I think society teaches us to be selfish in a way, you know, like put yourself first all the time, like make sure, you know, don't you know, people who aren't pushing you forward, you got to let them go. But I think that it's sort of, again, remembering this longer term process where it's sort of, people can't always be there for you. Maybe someone's going through something in their own life, and it's sort of maintaining, again, as I said, this sort of mutual respect and this base that, you can always come back to, and checking in that respect is there is the most, the key thing, because, people aren't constants. I think they're more variables in a sense, and it can be a beautiful thing where you come back to someone who you haven't seen in a while and you've both grown and you're able to connect in a way that you couldn't have if you'd been together that whole time. But I do think that's a tricky one, because it's also sort of, how long do you wait for someone, whether that's a friendship or a relationship or whatever. I mean, everyone grows at different rates and different ways, but at some point you also have to move on and create that space. But I think the one other thing that I wanted to mention really quickly was just like other people are growing and changing, I think it's also important for us as individuals to be receptive to what is coming to us, so we can say that we want love and success and whatever that means for us. But if we aren't really ready to accept that when it comes to us, then I think that that's also a block. So I think part of this process of visualizing is also, recognizing those things when they do come into your life and being, ready for them. So it kind of goes both ways. So, I mean, trust that other people are gonna grow and develop and understand that, but also yourself kind of take ownership for how you are receiving from other people. So
gosh, that last part. Because and I think it kind of connects to what I said at the beginning, where the first thing I asked you was if the process is like just accepting misery, right? And that's something weird that sort of happens when you get used to being in the process so much. And there's a lot of friction there. There's a lot of friction. There's a lot of existential questions. There's a lot of there's a lot of pain, like leaving this, leaving that, being left, and you kind of get used to that, like to that feeling of lack of permanence, if that makes sense. Like if you are in the process, if you know you're moving from country to country for the next 3 years, you kind of get used to, I'm just transiting. So now what happens when part of the, when you get to that part of the process where it's actually now just about embracing the stage you're at, because embracing at that point by definition has become just knowing that things will come and go, and you've strengthened yourself in that sense. But now there's a different form of strength that might need to be developed, which you just pointed out, of like knowing how to accept good things. So how has that been for you? Like, have you found that you're struggling with it? Have you struggled with it, or have you faced it yet at all?
With receiving good things, or with
getting to that point where it's more like now accepting more permanence and receiving good things, and
well, I think in terms of there's very little of permanence, I think, in my life. I mean, even in terms, I don't know where I'm going to be next year, I think that there's no, but I mean, I'm kind of half joking, because I also think that the permanence, or there is a sense of stability that has entered my life maybe in the last year or two that definitely wasn't there before. And I think that this acceptance of, trusting the process and everything else is only possible when you have something, not to sound too, I don't know, but you can't trust the process unless you have something within yourself to return to. If you are not your own rock, then you can go anywhere, and I mean, you're not gonna, what I'm trying to say is that you can be moving around a lot, but if you are still your own rock and you know who you are and what is important to you and who is important to you, then I think that makes transitioning, like geographically, for example, easier. Or, I mean, even whatever relationships, romantic relationships, if you still know who you are at the end of the day, of course it will be painful, but it's not like you are, you know, losing yourself as well when you lose another person. So it's kind of, I think that this, that's something that I have, when you ask about, has it been difficult to receive things? I mean, I think it has in a way, because I don't think I've always been ready to receive those things, because I didn't have that sort of inner stability. And I'm not saying that I have it 100% now, but I do think that I am more confident in who I am and what is important to me. And that there are people in my life that are, you know, I know I said before, people are not constants, right? But when you have a lot of people who are in your support network, if one of them is having a tough time, or a few of them are having a tough time, you help each other out, right? So it's kind of, it's not a, it's kind of, it's an exchange, you know, I mean, not an exchange sounds very sort of clinical, but I think in a friendship, it is supporting each other at different times. And I think when you have when you're lucky to have a lot of people who you can, or not even a lot, but, you know, quality people who are in your life, I think that makes everything a lot easier. And to receive other things on top of that, because you know that you are already whole, you know, you're not searching for someone or something to fill that space, but just to add on top. So
I mean, like I'm finding interesting that even with knowing that you're going through changes and you're transitioning from one place to another, you still need some things that you hold constant. So it's is that almost like things that stand at your core, or like things that are almost, how I've always put it, as like having a target, like having having a bullseye that might change, but like the fact that I always have a bullseye is maybe my constant. Is that kind of what you're getting at, or is it more like core personality type thing?
Well, I think I wouldn't call it a bullseye. I think if anything, I would call it a base. But I think that base is also a tricky word, because that implies that there's just one, you know, like that there's one thing that you return to. And I mean, even from a geographical perspective, that's tricky, right? Because I think, and I think you can also relate to this, to have roots in different places is like, you don't just have one base or one place that is, you know, home, or I mean, but that's a whole other discussion. But what I'm trying to say is that, you know, I think that there are certain core things, you know, core to your personality that are also core to other people, and when those links are formed, when you really find people who you resonate with and have the same values as you, and you know, want the same things, and not in terms of, you know, career aspirations or something else, but they want to live their life the same way that you hope to live your life. I think that that's what I mean by having those sort of, I guess, tethers, or a safety, not even a safety harness, right? But it's sort of like you are, you know, free to explore and to climb new heights in whatever aspects of your life. But, you know, if you fall, there are, you know, you have those ropes that are catching you, because that's, you know, it's not like you fall off and, you know, that's it. You fall into off a cliff. It's like, you're free to try new things, and you're free to grow, because you have, you know, that net. And I mean, you are also someone else's net, right? I think that's kind of that's the thing. Yeah.
And you know, it's funny when I speak to someone like you, I get a very different perspective, because it's like, you and I, and you went through it even earlier, like you were younger when you moved around from country to country, but we can relate in the sense that we have bases, but because of the way we've moved around, we've never fully had to be held accountable by one base for way too long. You know what I mean? So that that sense of guilt, and this is something that I find a lot of people tackle, a lot of people I meet now, that sense of guilt of jumping from one base to another, like having a few bases that are just not in one place. You know what I mean? Where it's almost like you say, people do have to grow apart sometimes, and it's always healthy to know that you can go back and you have that understanding that like maybe right now Katya is not the friend I should be around. I should move to this one a bit because they are more inclined to where I'm growing at. And it doesn't mean I'm burning bridges with her. It just means that for right now, she's not the shoulder I should be leaning on. And I went through that a bit with on another podcast episode as well, where it's like you can't get everything from one person or one base.
Yeah.
And it seems like even when you say it so confidently without that sense of guilt that I hear from a lot of people.
Now I feel like I should feel guilty, but
no, but it's our environments dictate that for us. Like I went to 7 different schools before I even got to UWC, right?
Yeah.
So I don't even have to be with the same friend group for I don't know 18 years of my formative life. It's bouncing around was something people expected. She's not a really like loyal person, yes, but not a permanent. I'm not permanently in one spot for a long time. And it's funny how your environment can dictate that and teach you that. But it's very hard to express to other people in that sense, to say that, oh, you can have a base and come back to it and not feel guilty about having left it. And people, you know. But like that also brings us to like the first quote about knowing when to like pop the grenade. And this is something I struggle with. And it was like one of the first questions I asked you as well on the podcast. I struggle with it in the sense that it's almost like I wait. So my mom talks about it like sometimes I think I'm a robot, where super strength for a very long time and then crash, right? And that's when I know it's time to jump. And it's almost like I'm relying on the mechanisms I've put in place a long time ago to bounce back, rather than the mechanisms I've put in place to walk before I have to bounce back. If that makes sense. Yeah. So I wanted to get into that with you a little bit, because I don't think it's a good thing on my end. It's because when you do start bouncing back, now you're using a lot of energy on recovery as opposed to progression. And by the time you progress, you've also drained a lot of energy from yourself. And cool, it's a nice story to tell. But it's so and earlier you mentioned you mentioned something when it comes to even with relationships of the respect, like the mutual respect aspect, is that maybe what you like respect, maybe the core to you knowing when to jump, like respect for others, respect for yourself, when that's lost, is that when you jump, or you have a completely different way of looking at it?
No, thank you for sharing also your experience with I mean, also going and then crashing at some point. And I think I have similar tendencies sometimes, which is something I'm trying to grow out of. Not that you need to, but I think that like the way that I do it is something that is not necessarily super healthy for long-term, like sustainable growth. I mean, as you said, it takes a lot of energy to bounce back. And I do think it comes down to respect. I think that when you're in, and I think here I'm talking purely about romantic relationships. And I think respect is important in all aspects of your life, and also with strangers, friends. I think it's always important to have respect as a baseline. But I think in with regards to respect and knowing when to jump, I think when respect is no longer there, then that for me is the kind of alarm clock going off saying, okay, this is it. But the problem is that you can't always hear that alarm clock, or you don't always hear it until it's too late. And I think that it's this sort of self-respect that you also mentioned. It's sort of, okay, what is understanding, am I putting myself in a situation with a person where I am no longer respecting myself? So am I compromising too much? Am I sacrificing too much? In any kind of relationship, whether it's a short one and it's some kind of fling or whatever, or if it's a serious relationship or something else. If you are losing self-respect by being in that relationship, I think that that's a very dangerous thing, because I guess there's an accompanying mechanism where you also try to justify it to yourself, and it makes it easier to ignore these sort of warning signs. And so I think that, now with you're talking about, so how do you know when to jump? Is it only when you're miserable? This is something that I'm really trying to work on. And now kind of like zooming back out, so not just romantic relationships, but of course, I mean, that's still an aspect. I'm trying to really work on honing my intuition and sort of understanding myself and whether something is working for me or not working for me in a moment. Because I think before you get to that stage where you lose self-respect, I think that there are other stages that you pass through where something is uncomfortable, but in a way where it's, not uncomfortable in a way that's making you grow, but uncomfortable in a way that you are compromising something about yourself or your values or your time, and that just doesn't make you feel good. As I said, because often this can be coupled with really positive emotions or really intense emotions. Sometimes those intense positive ones can drown out the other ones. And so it's really learning how to listen to yourself and to be honest with yourself, but also I think learning to be honest with the other people in your life who are part of those relationships or part of those other aspects. And I mean, I think, I don't know. I think when you're jumping from a relationship, right? I mean, I think then I think unfortunately that's often once something has already become, miserable. And But I do think that it's possible to still live by this quote and do it by intuition and not have to get to the point where you've lost yourself, whether this is a relationship or a job or, a place you're living. I think that it's possible to recognize those things and jump before it gets to a critical stage.
Yeah, and it's funny, the word respect. It seems pretty straightforward when you're when you're thinking about it, but like I've had to learn to not define like self-respect for myself as extreme strength. So I realized that I always had a perception of like, I respect myself when I'm showing strength, when I'm executing strength, when I'm fighting a war, when I'm doing something, or those like peak times where I sit down at the end of the day and I'm like, "Oh, you fought!" And like now you've earned your own respect. You get what I mean?
I feel that. Yeah.
And like that, by that definition, it's almost like you need like environments where you're constantly at war in order to respect yourself. Of which that's a very, very dangerous, very dangerous way to perceive it, because and I like mine comes from a Christian basis where I actually had to go, like I had to see a sermon, and this guy was basically just like before Jesus even did anything, before he was even performed miracles, the first thing that he heard from God was that this is my son in whom I am proud. He hadn't done a thing. He had just been born and basically just lived. And then only after that did he start like practicing stuff. So that hit me in the sense where I was like, and I don't need to have proven anything to respect myself. Like it's something that as a virtue I just need to have. And then everything else, that's how I'll be able to navigate like what spaces are not right for me. Because you can make any space right for you. Let's be honest. Like you can get used to an anxiety-ridden environment and decide that that's correct for you if you just like change your perception enough, right? So I guess that's where when you brought up the quote about the jumping, I was like, okay. I was like, and I think it comes back to what you were saying earlier, maybe of like knowing yourself first, so that you can and like maybe just respecting who you are at the core, as opposed to respecting yourself for the actions that you perform on a daily basis. It's I think it's one that's hard to balance, especially from a romantic sense, like you were mentioning. And then even from like a professional sense, it's very easy to do that, to have burnouts and so on, because your respect is based on what you do, on what other people perceive.
If I could just respond, I mean, I think I was it's really interesting what you said about strength and only earning kind of self-respect when you are, I mean, when you feel like you have been strong. I think that this is also something that I have struggled with in a lot of ways, because it was sort of, I am only, and to be perfectly honest with you, I think that that's something I'm still learning to, you know, I'm trying to understand why I sign up for these crazy long race. Like, I don't know, you know, I mean, part of it, I do enjoy it. But then another part of me says, okay, honestly, why, you know, who are you proving something? Are you proving something to someone? Is this why you are like putting yourself through such an ordeal? Is, you know, to, I mean, that's something I'm still trying to to understand myself. But I think coming back to this idea that respect should be at your core, and then, you know, I think there is a strength in respecting yourself. Like that in itself is an act of such strength and such, I think, maturity, when you get to the stage where you say, okay, I respect myself, I respect my boundaries, I can listen to what my, you know, what I am comfortable with, what I'm not comfortable with. I can, you know, and then live accordingly to that and according to your innermost feelings, and to listen to those and to respect those. I think that that is maybe even the ultimate strength, is because I think when you have, you know, the sort of strength that we see in day-to-day life of, you know, working crazy hours and pushing yourself to the point of mental and physical collapse. This is, I think, I mean, it's another kind of strength, right? But it's a strength in which you are also harming yourself in a way, you know, like it's a long-term process of, you know, you are losing something by pushing so hard. But when you know that you can always come back to, you know, I am myself regardless of, you know, what I'm doing in life, what I've achieved. And I definitely haven't gotten to that point yet where I have that sort of, it's something I'm working on, but I definitely don't have this. I think I still do measure my self-respect in a lot of ways based on what I do or don't do. And I think that's, you know, that's something I'm trying to learn from.
Yeah. I mean, the issue with that, and I think why it's important to like to sort of shake off, is you end up like putting that with everything. So even in terms of like your relationships with friends, with a family, it's almost like if you're not doing anything, you don't deserve to be respected in that context. It becomes a constant process of trying to prove yourself to other people, and then not looking very much for them to prove themselves. I don't know if you've ever found yourself in that like constant point of how do I show you I'm worth it? How do I show you I'm worth it?
Absolutely.
And then you realize
so
you're not
dangerous.
giving any value. Yeah.
So dangerous. I think it's something you can see that in so many aspects of life. I mean, whether this is sort of in whatever, academics is one thing, right? But I mean, coming back to running, where I've been in groups of people before where they had a really unhealthy relationship to running. And when you're in that space with people who have that unhealthy relationship, everyone is trying to outdo each other in terms of speed, outdo each other in terms of how little they're eating, you know, like it's just such an unhealthy space to be in. And this is one of those things where it's like, okay, I got to get out of here. You know, like this is no longer serving me. This is not the kind of space. This is not bringing me joy anymore. But in a relationship as well, you know, it's sort of like, I think I've definitely been, you know, in context with people where it's like, maybe you're not saying something out loud, but you're constantly trying to prove something to the other person, or even this feeling like, okay, I don't feel like I have their respect, but if I do this, maybe I'll get their respect. If I do this, maybe they'll look at me differently. And you should never ever do that for another person. Like, you know, I think this is something I learned the hard way is, you know, it should always be for yourself. Whatever you're doing, do it because it brings you joy, because it, you know, you're excited about it, not because you are hunting for some sort of validation or respect from another person. So
and it's rare that you ever come together as two people who don't respect themselves. There's usually like one person who's like okay with whatever they do and will pursue their actions and so on and just keep driving it, and you'll always end up being the giver, the one sacrificing. But I guess what I wanted to talk about a little more, like before like we reach the end is the process after the jump. So so like there's trusting the process and then maybe knowing that it's time to jump, and but then after the jump as well. And I think I mentioned this to you when we started and you asked me how I found Vancouver. And I said like the first 6 months for me were probably hell. Like I was constantly talking to people that I knew from a time before, because like forming the new connections. And it really, really felt like a big mistake to go from a 200-person school to a 60,000-person school. And I was so confident when I was doing it. I remember when people asked me, like, you're going to a really big school. And I'll be like, no, I'm done with this environment. I'm tired of it. We were 200, we were too close. I want to go somewhere where people don't know me. After I jump to somewhere where people don't know me, the loneliness.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think we do have to be honest about even the jump, or even that feeling we had when we first reached Armenia, and you leave the airport and they drive you along this road that's just, you have no clue where you're going.
Yeah. You look like you're on another planet, honestly. It's really,
Yeah, and then the really tough, like, cafeteria conversations we had with each other, or like the emotional times. And I think that those 2 years can probably be representative of an entire life cycle at once, because we
absolutely
we live through birth.
To death.
We all died a little and rose again.
That's very true. Very true.
Yeah, so I guess that's something I wanted to get into a little more with you, of like trusting the process after you've jumped, or just the process after you've jumped, those feelings that you get, that you go through.
For sure. I think I mean, that's a great question. I think first of all, because, and also it's good that you brought up Armenia, because I think that that's something that I don't think I've been, well, I think I haven't maybe gone through the same jump, in the sense that when I came to Armenia, it really was, you know, I don't know who I am or where I'm going from here. This is such a jump that my whole life, you know, changed so drastically and fundamentally, the way that I saw myself. And I mean, that's the point of UWC, right? Is to have those difficult conversations where you learn more about who you are and how you fit into the world, and even what the world is, you know, like this is something that it's a difficult time and extremely intense. And I think since then, I don't think I had that kind of, wow, I mean, everything in my life has just totally fallen apart. And I mean, not even fallen apart, but like, things haven't changed all at once since then in the way that they did when I first came to Armenia. So I think that that's the first thing, is maybe it's easier to navigate those jumps now if a jump is just from one aspect of your life, because those other aspects of your life are still intact in a way. You know, it's like, okay, maybe I need to leave a city or something, or I need to move to a different place. But, you know, I still know that there are certain aspects of my life that are constants, and that I can fall back on as, you know, and I think, what you said about Vancouver, I mean, I really resonated with, because London for me, first of all, I came in part because of a person, you know, and another thing you shouldn't do is to make big decisions based on, you know, especially when you're so young. And I think that I was really miserable here for a while, and I did feel super lonely, because when that person wasn't part of my life anymore, I was like, what's, you know, like, wow, all of these decisions I made, not just for myself or just taking myself and, you know, not really listening to myself, suddenly they were all like, wow, what is all this stuff doing in my life that I, you know, didn't want in the first place. But then I do think that, again, it comes back to this inner constant. And it's sort of like, if you are in a position where you, and this is going to sound again really sort of, I'm reading a book by Bell Hooks called All About Love, so I'm going to use some of the stuff that I've learned from this book, because I'm really like, I've had an epiphany. But if you are in a position where you are kind of open and you're ready to like give love in your life and receive love, and not just romantic, like in a relationship, but generally to your surroundings, to the people who are around you, to your work or your studies, if you are, you know, open and receptive to what is around you, and you are approaching it with an open mind and an open heart and, you know, whatever, then everything is going to be okay. You know, I think that that's the main thing, is sort of like, how do you navigate these jumps now? How do you navigate the feelings after the jump? It's sort of like, you know, you embrace what is new, and you are ready to embrace what is new, because you it's kind of like you're not resistant. You have to stay soft, you have to stay open, even though that's really difficult sometimes. It's like, to get through these transition periods, you need to be soft, I guess, which is a hard thing to do, you know, but it's being soft, and it's being open, and it's relying on the people who are around you and who are in your life, who can give you that sort of emotional connection and emotional support to get through those changes. And hopefully, you know, like, as you get through life, the more open you are and the more, you know, receptive you are, the more relationships, like friendships like that, the more people you have in your life who are, you know, who support you and who you support. And I think then it becomes a lot easier to get through life, because at the end of the day, you're still your own rock, right? But it's okay to lean on other people sometimes. And I think this is something that over the past year I've really learned and used and opened up in, you know, at times when maybe I wouldn't have previously. And you know, it was incredible to see how ready people are. And I think it's sort of, I'm just so grateful to have, you know, people in my life who can who are willing to do that. And I think so. So back to your, sorry, that was a long-winded answer to your question of how do you navigate. But I do think that it's still, it comes back to, regardless of whether you're jumping, you're not jumping, if you're living in a way that's consistent with the person that you want to be and the things that you believe in, things hopefully will fall into place. But I also feel like if I listen to this conversation again in like 2 years, I don't know if I'll just be thinking, wow, you didn't know what was coming, you know, like in life, you know, you're just young and naive and optimistic. But I do think that, you know, being open and honest and loving is an important thing in wherever you go in life. So
and I think, like, I think you brought up something really important in general, that like sometimes when you jump, you think you're jumping towards one thing, but you need to be open enough to, I think the openness is important, because it's crucial to your recovery. Because when you do jump and you think you're jumping into I don't know, a pool of water, sometimes you're going to land up in some sludge, and like, be open enough to say like, okay, I'm in this sludge, but I can wash it off, you know. And I think that's where I think people mistake openness for like saying, oh, just go around, keep getting hurt, and like, you know, but I think
for naivety,
it's not. It's more of just knowing that things might not turn out the way I want them to be, and I have to be open enough to see the opportunities that may arise from that. That may be like, I was jumping in for the relationship or the marriage, but from that I've gained, I don't know, a sister, or I've gained a friend that I could have never gained any other way if I hadn't gone through it like this. So so I think that's where the openness is crucial. I don't think you'll look back at it and don't think you're naive at all. Because
I hope not.
In a way, it's almost just like accepting that things may not go the way you planned. But and I guess one of the last things I wanted to ask you about is, we went through such an extreme experience, right? That like you mentioned before, that you kind of went through everything and compressed in those 2 years. And so everything after that now has just been, it'll never feel like that again. It'll never be that extreme. Probably, we hope.
We hope. We can only hope.
But how do you support others though, when you've had such an extreme experience? And it's difficult to explain it. I find, like, I don't think I've ever been really, I don't think I've even tried to explain to people, like, when we say we've been in a dark place, that we've had to come out, and like some of us, we just meet and we click automatically, because it's almost like we were just each other's family at that point, whether we even spoke or not. There was just a knowing look, like, along the hallways. And so how do you support others, like people that you meet who are going through more like regular experiences, And I say regular, not to like shun everyone else, but I just mean like it's more now one thing at a time, like one batch at a time. And how have you found that, like navigating? You know,
Well, I think it's also a good question, because I think that this role of supporting is something that I'm also, learning how to do better. I think that previously, when someone had some issue or something and I wanted to help, I think maybe I would share my own experience in a way to, to try and show, empathy with what they were going through, and to try and say, okay, look, I've been in a similar situation, and but I think I've learned that it's not always necessary to share your own experience, and it's sometimes people just need someone to listen to, and or to listen to them, someone to listen to them, someone who can be there for them. And I think we all have our strengths in terms of how we can support others. I think some people are very good at this sort of like physical like support, in the sense of like giving hugs. I'm notorious for being awful at hugs. I'm working on it. It's I have a game plan. I am actively trying to improve.
You have a vision board.
A vision board of hugs. Actually, I should do that. But but I think it's also recognizing our own strengths and what we can give to others, and what we can be for others. And I don't know, like I've had some friends who've gone through like life crises recently with their work or with something else. And I'm like, I can make a Notion spread for you, like to help plan your next, job or whatever, job search. And I mean, this is sort of, I think at the end of the day, it's not necessarily even about how you show your support, because we all have different ways of doing that. So I mean, maybe mine is making Notion spreads for someone, and for someone else it's just giving a hug. But I think it's showing up for people, and them knowing that you are there for them, and that you love them, and that you care about them, and also being vocal about the fact that they are important to you. Like I think when we're in a dark place and we are feeling lonely, and I mean, this is regardless whether it was at UWC or whether it's, another, someone has something difficult going on in their life or something else. And actually, I feel like I have it a lot easier now after UWC, because we've gone through that, and because we've formed these connections. And I know now that, oh, okay, I can always reach out to these people if I'm going through a rough time. But I think it's maybe even worse for someone who has, maybe at a slightly later stage of their life, where they're having a crisis of, was this degree the wrong idea? Is this job the wrong thing? Like, was everything for the last 5 years a total, like waste of time? And I think I haven't been in that situation before, where, I've had, like, I haven't had a crisis in that sense, but I still do think that it comes down to the quality of the connection that you have with someone else, and they know if you love them, like a good friend, they can you feel it when you care about someone deeply, like any friend in your life. Also just showing up for people, I think, is really important. And even like when I'm going through something difficult and I need to talk to someone, it's not because I want like concrete advice. I want someone to be there for me and say, okay, I'm here for you, and I feel less alone. And when I feel less alone, I can gather that strength to kind of continue on myself. So I try to do that for other people, but it's also something that I'm learning. I mean, as you said before, we do jump around a lot, and I think that can be difficult with friendships that originate and kind of stay in one place, and people who aren't used to moving around so much. I think that can also be interpreted as you just being flighty and
inconsistent.
Inconsistent. So that's something that I'm still trying to navigate, I think.
Well, the only reason I asked is I've also learned that, like, trusting your process is also like trusting the people around you's process. And sometimes that means, I think you mentioned before, sometimes that means patience for what they're going through. And it's difficult, because it's balancing the idea of like, you need me and I need to support you, and maybe knowing that I can't support you, and just like
for sure.
being able to navigate that. So that's why I asked, because it's you, if you're coming from a very, very different place in your life, sometimes you do have to acknowledge that maybe my experiences, my whatevers, they don't give me what I need to be able to support this person or what they need at the moment. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's a conversation I've been having with myself a lot.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I think I would just maybe add quickly to that something else that I just thought of. I think if the people in your life are committed to growth and sort of self development in like a non-self-help way, like not but like really committed to growing as people and to dreaming and if they get into a rough patch, of course it means that they can't always be dreaming, and sometimes you need to help push people back out and but I think that it's about maybe having people in your life in the first place who have similar a similar commitment to growth and and I think when you are with people or in a relationship or a friendship with someone who is equally committed to becoming a better person over time, I think then it becomes easier to reconverge at different points, even if you go through rough patches on the way, because it's like that person is also working, and even if they're the process takes a different amount of time or a different direction, you're still committed to to learning and growing, and I think that's an important aspect as well.
Yeah, and like it's funny because you're bringing that up, and that's it's almost like it brings us back to that, like the trusting yourself being the crucial point, like trusting that even if they're going through this phase, I won't be necessarily swayed by it, because I think a lot of lack of support is like fear of failure yourself, that if I'm 100%. Supporting this person, it means I'm gonna have to slack a little bit for them. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like we run away from people in different stages because we're like, if they're in this stage, I'm going to have to be in that stage as well, which is not always the case. If you for
sure. But I think that it's also important to remember that we're like, as we are all also going through our own process and our own journey, I think it's sort of, there are some situations where it's not healthy for us to be in. If someone needs the kind of support we cannot provide, it's also totally okay to say, I can't do this, I don't have the capacity right now for this. You can say, I love you very much, but I can't be that person for you right now because you are not you are not stable enough, or you do not have the resources to hold up yourself as well as someone else. So it's kind of, I think the important thing is just when you do have that energy and when you do have the capacity, that you give to other people what they give to you. It doesn't have to be at the same time in life, but when you are able to, that you are, I guess, generous with your extra energy and with your the things that you can give to other people. But I think that it is important to also put boundaries in terms of supporting others, because otherwise you both drown, right? So that's the risk of
like knowing when to rest. And most people perceive this as like burning bridges. Like, I don't believe in burning bridges, because I do think a friendship can be bad in one time. It's just like the same as a career. Like, a certain job can be bad at one period in your life because of the way your mind is working, and then very good for you at a different stage. Like, if maybe you had a very bad like UWC experience, for example, you'd be so surprised at how like it would have felt now, like with the person that you are. So different stages. Like, I do believe in that you can, sometimes you just need to know that, I need a water break, and then I can resume. But I guess that comes back to like the fact that we are more forgiving of ourselves for that, because we've moved around and gone back to places and still realize that they feel the same and you're the same person, and you can still contribute 100% there, even if you haven't been there for a while. So I think that's tricky for a lot of people to learn, but when you've moved a bit, you kind of accept that, like, as a way of life.
And I love what you said before, that you are loyal but not permanent, like in a place. I think that's a really interesting way to put it, and I think also rings true for a lot of people, is like you're always you can always be somewhere in spirit and you know, always have love for a place or for people, and even if you're not physically there, or your presence is not, you know, like you can't be everywhere at once, right? But
Yeah, yeah.
you know, it is possible to be, you know, to be loyal to a lot of different people and places, and
Yeah.
that's also tricky. But I think it's possible.
It's tricky, but I think when you stop trying to be everything for everyone at one
So
stage,
true.
it becomes so much easier. Because like I know one of my friends said this to me. He was like, he described me as a low maintenance friend. So like, so the type of friend that you don't have to text and check in on a daily basis, or but
Yeah.
every time you see me, I give you everything. Like, I'm present, I'm there, and then maybe you don't see me for another 6 months, because what you learn is you can't be everything for everyone. Like, I don't want
True.
to seem like I'm not like available. I am available if you need me, but I can't be available for you every day. Like, it's impossible to be available for you, available for my parents, available for myself,
Yeah.
because I want to make sure I'm giving 100% to the people I'm with, rather than 10% to everyone, and then it
For
ends up
sure.
being like constituted as flakiness. And yeah, so I think it's very important to choose, even in the stages that you're in your life, which relationships to nurture, because you can't take on everyone and like let everyone down. In a sense, it ends up letting you down as well.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah,
and
for
just
sure.
setting off your whole process. um but yeah, I mean, as we approach the end of our conversation, this is
Yeah.
so, it's so hard for me to let go of this one. It's so
I'm like, I feel like after this conversation, I'm going to be thinking and I'm still in quarantine, right? So I have the next
yeah.
like 5 days to have like an existential, I don't know, I'm not going to say crisis, epiphany, hopefully after this conversation.
I've had
But
a
I'm
few
already
epiphanies
having,
just
yeah,
talking to you. Yeah.
no, same here. I'm like, speaking to you has been I mean, so valuable. I think also not only for me to sort of articulate things that I've sort of been trying to make sense of in my head for a really long time, but also the way that you listen and respond. I mean, I think I was like, whoa, I mean, this is really, really insightful to talk to you. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I knew when I asked you that you were going to be a grenade, so I was very excited.
Well, I mean, this is like so much even better than I had hoped for. I mean, you're like the
Expected.
best
Yeah.
host. So
Oh, thank you
thank
so
you.
much. You have been a really great guest as well. And I just wanted to ask you before we like head out, if there's anything that you really feel like you need to round up or get off your chest, like something that you had noted that we didn't get into.
Oh, I don't think I did make notes, but I did sort of touch all those points. But I think if people have made it this far in the podcast, and I think if people take anything away from this, and in terms of navigating, I think that the most important lesson is probably to live in a way that is true to yourself, and with respect to yourself and to other people. And I think that everything else somehow hopefully falls into place, and there is some sort of guiding light as a result of living true to your self and your core beliefs. So I think that that's, I mean, of course it's a process to get to those core beliefs and to get to that respect, but I think that once you have it, I think that, you know, instead of chasing individual goals, work on that core, and then everything else will hopefully happen. But yeah, I now need to live by my own advice.
It's difficult, and I hear it say it in different ways, where people say, "Oh, get to know yourself, get to trust yourself," and even God will start speaking to you. Or some people just say like your rationale and your reason will start, or like your spirit will speak to you. Like, people have different ways of saying it, but it always comes back to that same thing. Like, and you'll just know when to jump or when to rest or when to like just go with the flow.
This is where I'd say trust the process. I mean, trust the process, not just in the sense of that, you know, the quote as we discussed it today, but just trust that you will also get to the point in your life when it will make sense, or when things that don't make sense now do make sense. I mean, I'm hoping that that's true anyway, but I think that it has been true in some sense. And you know, I trust the process that one day I will get to the point where I will have that core that I can always, you know, lean on. And
Oh, thank you so much, Katya.
Yeah, thank you.
Gosh, this has been so great.
It has been a great conversation. Really, thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you for inviting me. I'm really, I'm so honored that you asked me to speak with you. So,
oh gosh, I should have you again. I think we do need like a different topic.
Yeah, I mean, maybe like a checkup, like how's that going for you?
Yeah,
And then,
yeah. See.
But yeah,
But
I'm looking forward to listening to your episode as well. I hear that there's one in the pipeline. So
yeah, the one I did it with Dagon. I brought her back and she did a reverse episode.
wow.
Yeah,
So
that was intense in its own way. I still need my mom to listen to it before I decide whether to release it or not.
Oh, I hope you release it. It will be very very special, I think. So.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, well, if you've been listening up until this point, guys, thank you so much for listening. And I hope you learned as much as I did. Like Katya said, I'm going away with a lot of epiphanies and I'm probably exhausted for the rest of the day today because I'll be thinking. Thank you. Yeah.